In the quiet hills of rural Wales, where the rivers whispered in the valleys and the mountains stood guard over the land, there lived a man named Thomas Davies. Thomas was a simple man, a farmer by trade, but he carried within him the weight of generations. The Welsh, once a proud and independent people, had seen their culture, their identity, and their language slowly diminish under the dark rule of their English overlords. The catalyst for Thomas's rebellion came one day when he was driving through the village of Aberdare. There, hanging from a rusted pole on the side of the road, was a glaring sign, "Welcome to Aberdare," nothing else. No mention of the Welsh name, Aberdare. No trace of the ancient tongue that had given birth to the town. Only English. It was a commonplace sight across Wales. English-only road signs dotted the landscape, erasing the history and heritage of the country in favor of a foreign tongue. But on that day, driving through Aberdare, something inside Thomas snapped. He couldn't let this continue. The government had ignored Welsh for far too long, reducing it to a secondary language in its own land. The signs, he realized, were a symbol of this injustice, a constant, blatant reminder that the Welsh language had been all but silenced. Determined to make a stand, Thomas decided to take matters into his own hands. He would begin a campaign to remove the English-only signs and restore the Welsh language to its rightful place in the country. But he knew it had to be done in secret. If the authorities caught wind of his plans, they would stop him before he could even get started. He started small. One night, with only a flashlight and a wrench, he drove to the nearest signpost. "Welcome to Brecon," it read in English only. He carefully detached the sign and took it with him. In the dead of night, he melted the sign down and sold the aluminum at a local scrapyard for a decent price. The scrap dealer didn't ask questions, just handed him cash in exchange for the metal. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start his movement. As the weeks passed, Thomas became more confident in his efforts. With each piece of metal he sold, he was able to fund the next phase of his mission. He began replacing the English-only signs with his own, handmade signs that proudly displayed the Welsh language alongside the English. At first, the authorities were baffled. Signs were disappearing all over the country, often in the dead of night, with no trace of the culprit. No one could figure out how the campaign was being financed. The government sent police to investigate, but every clue seemed to vanish, as if the signs had been erased by the very wind itself. The newspapers picked up the story, calling it the work of a phantom vandal, a rogue activist who had somehow managed to get away with his defiant acts. Yet Thomas, ever cautious, remained anonymous, a shadow in the night. His only mark the handmade Welsh language signs he left in place of the old, oppressive English-only ones. The campaign spread, and it became more than just a protest, it became a movement. The people of Wales began to take notice, and many joined the cause, demanding the return of their language to public life. The government, initially dismissive, began to feel the pressure. The English language had long been the dominant force in Wales, but the more the people rallied around Thomas's cause, the more it became clear that something had to be done. The people weren't going to stay quiet any longer. Then, one fateful night, Thomas's luck ran out. The police had been keeping a closer watch on the scrapyards, and one officer noticed something strange. The same metal from road signs was being sold repeatedly by a man who didn't quite fit the profile of a scrap dealer. It wasn't long before they pieced together the truth. Thomas Davies, the quiet farmer, was behind the campaign. He was arrested and brought to trial. The case sparked outrage across Wales, and people took to the streets, waving flags and chanting in Welsh. They didn't just support Thomas, they supported the right of their language to be treated with respect. The trial was a spectacle, and when Thomas took the stand, he didn't hide his feelings. "The language of my ancestors," he declared, his voice steady, "has been oppressed for too long. This land belongs to the Welsh, and so does our language. I will not stand by while it is erased from the face of our country." Despite his defiance, the trial didn't go as the English state had hoped. The outpouring of support for Thomas was overwhelming. Politicians, historians, and cultural leaders all weighed in, and the government found itself under intense scrutiny. It was clear that the status quo could no longer hold. In the end, the government passed new laws mandating the use of Welsh on public signage, in schools, and in government institutions. The Welsh language was finally given the recognition it deserved. It was a hard-fought victory, one that had taken years of struggle and sacrifice. But as the laws were passed, Thomas was released from prison. He returned home to a hero's welcome, but he knew that the fight was not over. The people of Wales would continue to stand guard over their language, ensuring that it would never again be silenced. And as for Thomas, he knew that he had made his mark on history. He had fought for the right of the Welsh people to use their own tongue, and in doing so, he had inspired a new generation to carry that fight forward. As the sun set over the mountains, Thomas smiled. He had won, and in the distance, he could hear the whispers of the Welsh language carried on the wind, stronger than ever before.